The number one thing you need to prepare for the birth of your dreams is your mindset. If your mind is right, the chances are your birth will be right too. In my opinion, your mindset is actually the only thing you need for birth. Oh, and your body, of course. If your mindset, your heart, and your body are all aligned together, the chances of you having the birth that you've dreamed of healing that trauma that sits so deeply inside of you for all of these years is extremely high. Today, I'm going to share with you the 5 mindset shifts that I made between my traumatic home birth turned C-section birth to my completely blissful and redeeming free birth that I had in the comfort of my own home, all by myself. My first birth was a completely normal pregnancy that was supposed to end in a completely normal home birth that quickly escalated through unnecessary interventions to a hospital transfer, and then, of course, to an unnecessary and very traumatizing C-section. If you would like to know more details about my birth stories, either my first traumatic birth or my second redeeming free birth, I'm going to link both of those in the description box below. My second birth, 3 years later, was the most amazing event. I free birthed our second son in the perfect and beautiful and blissful privacy of our own home in my bedroom, all by myself without even my husband present. Now, while it is exuberantly clear that the circumstances of my 2 births are so different, the biggest difference between my first and second birth was my mindset and the changes that I made on the inside that then reflected onto the outside, that then shaped my circumstances, shaped that my circumstances interacted with me, but mostly shaped how I approached the entire event. To make this a little bit more tangible, for my first birth, my husband and I attended birth classes. We prepared our home extensively. We gathered all the supplies that our home birth midwife told us we should have on hand. We went to all the appointments with her. We did all of the things that we were told we needed to do. From the outside looking in, we were extremely prepared. But on the inside, I still carried a pretty large amount of fear. Now, I don't think that that is uncommon for a first-time birthing mother. I don't even think that it is wrong. What did end up being quote-unquote wrong is my belief that my home birth medical midwife was in fact a wise woman who would guide me through some of those feelings and help me overcome my own limitations in order to have my baby. This was not the case. And truth be told, perhaps this wasn't even supposed to be her role, even if she had been a wise woman. Now, I'm not going to go into all the details of how she actually did end up sabotaging my birth. You can watch my first birth story up here if you would like to know more about that. But there was this place really deep inside of me, especially after labor had begun, where I did want to be rescued. And I did not have this understanding that birth is actually extremely lonely and only up to me, and that truthfully, nobody can help me. Even when it came to the extreme of cutting my baby out of my body, and ostensibly that might have seemed helpful, in the long run it wasn't, because I was still the one left to suffer all the consequences. I liken birth a little bit to working out. If you want to have a fit and strong body that feels great and energized, there's no way around doing the physical work of getting to the gym every single day, lifting those weights, or doing whatever workout program you're doing. No amount of money or friendship or even love can get somebody else to be able to do this work for you and for you to reap the benefits of a fit, strong, toned physique. That is exactly the same with birth. In order to reap the benefits of going through the initiation of birth, something that has been completely forgotten in our culture today, you have to walk the path yourself. And the number one thing that is going to help you to do this, and that helped me to do this and to go from a pretty tragic birth to triumphant birth, was the mindset shifts that I had decided I was going to implement. Before I jump into the 5 mindset shifts that changed everything for me, I need to mention we birth the way we live. And so even though I am going to apply those mindset shifts to birth specifically, they are actually applicable to life at large. Birth is like a catalyst. It's like a little container sampler of life where everything is heightened and all of your weaknesses or strengths really get to come to the fore. And so even if you are not pregnant, but maybe planning to be pregnant, there is no reason to wait until that time to implement some of the shifts that I'll be talking about. In fact, I continually work on implementing all of those mindset shifts in my daily life and very often remind myself of my birth to help me implement them in the more mundane aspects of my life. All right, let's jump right in. Mindset shift number 1, taking radical responsibility. This was by far the biggest shift I had to make and the one that made the biggest difference. I decided that I was going to be an adult and I would take responsibility for all outcomes of my birth. When you really pause to think about it, this is actually already inherently present in life itself. It's just whether you acknowledge it or not, whether you use some of the buffers that our society and, for example, the medical system present us with to help shield you from feeling the full-blown effect of taking radical responsibility. But at the end of the day, you are always the one responsible since you are, or me in this case, I was going to carry all the consequences like I did with my first birth. And so I decided that for my second birth, after having witnessed that my medical midwife was actually not faithful to me and was actually not carrying the responsibility of all outcomes, but was very keen to move them onto somebody else when things were not going exactly the way that her certification board outlined things should be going in a cookie cutter birth world that just simply does not exist. I decided I was going to be the one to carry full responsibility for every single outcome of my birth, from the jubilant one to some of the less jubilant possibilities. I decided that not only was I going to carry that responsibility, but I was going to be the orchestrator of my reality. But more on that later. I stopped waiting for somebody to save me, somebody to tell me what to do, somebody else to tell me if things are looking good or things are not looking so great. Instead, I took full responsibility over myself, my baby, and that meant everything. Things like nutrition, lifestyle, how am I feeling every day? What are my stress levels like? What do I actually need in this moment? Tuning into my baby. What does my baby need in this moment? What do I truthfully need to get the job of bringing my baby into the world done? I stopped paying attention to what anybody and everybody else was saying around me, and instead, truthfully, for the first time in my life, I solely focused on taking full responsibility and ownership of my state and adjusting everything around it to help me succeed. Mindset shift number 2, I changed my fear into excitement. Instead of fearing the onset of labor and the many different experiences that come with it, I had decided to become excited about every single sign that I encounter that shows me that I'm getting closer to meeting my baby. With my first pregnancy, one of the reasons why I made some of the choices that ultimately led to the complete sabotage of my birth was I had this part of me that was just intrinsically hesitant to tip into the portal of birth, to surrender deeply enough to let it come over me. And this was not anything that I could articulate at the time, and yet I could feel it so strongly inside. This kind of feeling like I'm sitting on the precipice, on the very edge of the cliff, and I am so scared to make the jump, even though that's really the only way I can go. With my second birth, I learned to welcome every single sensation and sign that my baby is coming. When my waters started trickling, I became excited when I could feel my first small surges come in the morning of my baby's birthday. And incidentally, my birthday, as my baby was born on my birthday, I welcomed them as long-lost friends. I was grateful. I was excited. And even though I knew that there was some hard work that lay ahead, I only chose to focus on the gratitude and excitement of each coming sensation. Mindset shift number 3. I went from feeling broken and incapable to actually feeling powerful and knowing that I was designed to do this. After my first birth, for the longest time, I believed that I was one of the true emergency cases, one of the 1 to 3% of women that would not survive if it wasn't for modern medicine. And I'm not doubting that this 1 to 3% exist. They truthfully do, but that has nothing to do with our 35 to sometimes 80% C-section rate. When I finally gathered the courage to start looking at my birth in detail, one section after another, and I began deconstructing every single thing that I was told, that I chose to believe, and that I even myself chose to do. I decided to accept radical responsibility for the part of my birth that were completely under my control and that I did not meet my expectations with. And I also stopped being controlled by some of the lies or inaccuracies that I was led to believe by the people that I had hired to help me. I went down every single detail of my birth and I researched, I listened to stories, I deconstructed all the way down to the deep-seated realization that I was never broken like I had believed, or incapable like I had also believed, and that my body truly is designed to do this and can do this. No matter what the past held, no matter what people say, I found a very deep-seated conviction that I was created by God in this world as a woman with one of my top jobs in this lifetime being to bring forward new life. The lies that I had previously believed kept me small, kept me dependent on the system, on an outside system of validation and constant checking myself, whether I'm doing things right, whether I'm messing up. But this was the same system that had failed me previously. Once I went through this entire exercise, that power was lost, and I had reclaimed it for myself instead. Mindset shift number 4. I went from believing that your mindset during birth is just a secondary thing to knowing that it is the number one thing. And I know I touched on this a little bit at the beginning of this video, and so I will give you some practical examples at this point of how I implemented this during my pregnancy and my birth. After reflecting on my first birth, I realized that one of the things that had really gotten to me and that made a huge impact on my mindset that then carried forward all the consequences into my birth was people who I'm not even that close to, that I don't even talk to on a daily basis, checking in with me from a certain point onwards almost constantly. And as a pretty introverted person with a very tight inner group and a pregnant first-time mother, soon to become mother, every single time my phone would beep and another person who I didn't even know that closely would be just checking in on me, made me feel like this should already be happening. Why is it not happening? Maybe something is wrong. And all of those thoughts started spinning in my head, and ultimately they all contributed to the immense pressure I felt towards the end of my pregnancy and to me making some of the choices that I made under a bunch of other outside pressure that was also put on me. Second time round, I was so intent on having a successful free birth. I would have gone to any lengths to protect my space and my mindset, even to the extent of not telling anybody I was pregnant. Now, I'm not saying this is what you have to do. If I became pregnant again, I'm not even sure that's what I would do again. But at that time, to protect this healing experience and my mindset throughout all of it, this was the path that I chose for my own personal peace. I obviously told people who were around me in my physical space. That would have been weird if I had pretended I was not pregnant when I was very clearly pregnant. But I did not post about it online. I did not message anybody who was not in my physical space, and I have friends and family all over the world. I did not tell anybody that I was expecting a baby until after my son was born in my bedroom, and we called everybody and said, surprise, we've been keeping a little secret for about a year now, and here he is. You might think this is crazy, and that's totally fine, but for me to find the strength of mindset that I needed, I had to get a little bit crazy in order to protect my space and make sure that I'm putting my mindset before everything else. Mindset shift number 5. I understood that birth is not something to survive or live through. It's actually a sacred initiation into motherhood that you simply cannot skip. After my first birth, I had struggled with what has nowadays become completely normalized. Things like postpartum depression, anxiety, and so much doubt in my mothering of my son. So much doubt of myself, of my future, of so much disorientation of what my place in the world actually is. Years later, I realized that I had begun this initiation from maiden to mother, this death of sorts. But I never got to be carried through or carry it through myself to the rebirth. It was interrupted. And so I got lost in the death space, and that's what I was experiencing, was the death of prior self without the rebirth of my new self. Now, having experienced both and seeing the differences firsthand of how easeful, blissful, joyful motherhood is when you've gone through the initiation. I'm not saying easy. I think motherhood is always challenging, but it sits completely differently when you've allowed yourself to go through that initiation. And I do believe that this mental health crisis that we are seeing amongst mothers nowadays is to a huge extent, among other things, caused by all the interruptions and interventions and trauma that is inflicted upon them during birth. How we birth shapes the entire humanity. It becomes the rhetoric that we pass down to our daughters or our daughters' friends or even our own friends. The stories that we tell of our birth are extremely important. They have the power to dissuade somebody from ever wanting to have children. What a tragic event. Or on the other hand, to arm them with the self-belief, knowing that they too were created by God to do this. You cannot skip the initiation of birth and have a truly successful, grounded, rooted experience in motherhood. For me, recognizing that birth was not just the birth of my baby, but also the rebirth of me, gave it completely different sense of gravitas and gave it even more meaning than it had before, which shifted my mindset to be able to go through without that much difficulty. So maybe you are an expectant mother, maybe you recognize that mindset is the most important thing that you can work on, and you're wondering, okay, what do I do practically to prepare my mindset for birth? First of all, I recommend that you get my completely free ebook where I outline the 5 mindset shifts that I discussed today in a lot more detail with practical examples and things that you can go implement. I'm going to include a link to that down below. Here are a few things that I would recommend you start doing on top of that if you're ready. Number 1, if you've had a traumatic birth experience in the past, don't be afraid to look the dragon in the face, right in the eye, and deconstruct every single thing about it. Accept responsibility where you can or where you should. Don't be afraid of assigning responsibility for things that are not yours to carry. Connect with your baby and your body daily. Build trust. Start with small things like, what do I feel like I should eat today? What are my cravings? Is that a helpful craving? Does that serve my health and my baby? What do I feel like I should do today? Is laying on the couch really the best thing for my baby? And is that really truthfully what I'm feeling deep down inside? Or am I really feeling like moving my body in a specific different way that might actually be the thing that I need. Support your nervous system. If texts from other people stress you out the way they did to me, create a scenario where that no longer is the case. Recruit your husband for help if needed. Get excited for your birth instead of dreading it. Practice welcoming every single sign of your baby coming nearer to you. Learn to anticipate it with excitement. Know that whatever comes your way, you will handle it. Whether you are planning an unassisted birth like I did, know that it's not a religion. If a need arises at any point where you feel like you would benefit from medical assistance, you are free to go do that. That was my MO all throughout. If throughout my entire pregnancy, which I did have a completely wild pregnancy, I did not see any providers, do any tests or anything whatsoever, but I always reserved the right to change my mind, and same during my birth. You should always know that you can always do what's best for you and your baby. Your entire life has the potential to change when you change your mindset about your birth. On the morning when I first felt those waters trickle, I did not feel fear or doubt. I felt excitement. When I felt my baby finally emerging, after all of those years of wondering what was wrong with me, why was I so broken that I couldn't birth my own baby, I felt the most victorious I had ever felt in my entire life. That is available for you too. Your birth transformation starts in your mind. And so if you're already pregnant, the question is, are you spending more time on planning things like the nursery and the things you need to have on hand for your birth than actually working on the thing that will make the biggest difference by far, which sits right here between your ears? What if the story you were told about your birth, if you've had a previous birth, and your body's ability was not the whole truth? Thank you so much for watching. If you had gone through a traumatic birth yourself and would like to know more about my first birth and how I deconstructed it to help me be ready to free birth my second baby, that video is the next video for you to watch.